I'm Ann Zimmerman. I'm the Vice President of the Salina League of Women Voters. We are so glad you're all here. Lori Troe, our president, had a church meeting. She'll be coming late, but she gives you her greetings and is sorry she can't get in on the first. The League of Women Voters is a not-for-profit, non-partisan organization. We, as opposed to many other organizations, we do not support or oppose candidates, and we do encourage public participation, civic participation by everybody who's eligible, and we work to get voters registered, although there's some, we have a pause on our voter registration and doing it ourselves in the last couple of years because of a new law that means we could be considered felons if we, if they think that we are a, what do you call it, an election official. If someone thinks we're an election official registering people to vote, we could be accused of a felony. And we don't want to be felons, but we do want people to register to vote. So we do have lots of QR codes that send you to ksvotes.org. I'm guessing that every single person here is registered to vote, but if you know anybody who isn't, they have until August some date. Does anyone know?
October 13th.
13th of October to register for the November 7th election, which is the school board and the city commission for election. So this is our Fall Issues Forum. We have had Fall Issues Forums for many years. I think last year we moved it to spring because of the August primary vote that was happening, and so we had our Fall Issues Forum in the spring. But we're back to the fall this year, and glad to have you all here. We are having our speaker as Chief C.J. Wise. He began as our police chief last winter, I think in February, is that right? January, okay. And he'll tell us about himself, and we hope he'll tell us about his plan for policing in Salina. Chief Wise has 25 years of law enforcement experience in his home state of Oklahoma. He was a detective, a SWAT team member, a K-9 officer, drug enforcement and internal investigations officer. He has a master's degree in criminal justice management and a bachelor's degree in business and organizational leadership. He is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy, and he is also a member of the Native American Caddo Nation in central Oklahoma. Please welcome Chief C.J. Wise.
Thank you all very much for coming out. You know, it always impresses me that anyone wants to hear me talk, you know, so, and I say this all the time because my wife, she is tired of hearing me talk, you know, and so, you know, just tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm from Tecumseh, Oklahoma, small little town, about 3,500 people, born and raised there, and I had another brother. He's 4 years older, and my parents always dreamed of us staying in a small town, and so that's what my mom wanted for us. Well, as we kind of got older, and to kind of back it up, so first I thought I was going to be a pro football player. I dreamed of it, and I thought, man. And then, you know, the biggest look I ever got at college, Pennsylvania University, sent me some information, and I sent them some tapes, and then they came and talked to me, and they said, we thought you were taller than that. Because the football coach did me a favor, and on our stat sheet, he listed me at 6'2". So, you know, in shoes, I'm right at 6 foot. So, and like I said, when they came, they're like, man, we expected someone a little bigger. So, you know, so that was kind of my dream initially. And then as it kind of went on, I kind of really thought, well, maybe that won't work out. So I thought, well, I'm going to be maybe going to athletic training because I'll be able to hang around sports, and, you know, because luckily the hospital I had, they had some athletic trainers assigned to us, and so that was my interest. And so I was getting recruited to play football here at Kansas Wesleyan, and so I came, and whenever I came first, before I even saw the football game, we came and we met with the advisor, and they asked me what I was wanting to major in, and I told them, and so they sat down and they told me, they're like, how was your math and science grade? And I was like, yeah, it's all right, you know. And they're like, if you're not just passionate about math, you're going to fail in science. And I was like, I mean, that was like a slap in the face, but I felt it, because I was like, man, I kind of thought I could kind of eke through, because like I've always said, how much science do I need to tape ankles? But I guess a lot. So it really sent me thinking. When I left here, I never played football here, but I remember going back home going, well, that's not really what I'm supposed to do. What am I supposed to do? And so through some thinking and stuff, I decided on law enforcement. And so it's funny that when years down the road, when this job came up, and that brief interaction is what led me to even apply here. And so it's a God thing. And so me and my wife, we could sit here and tell you a whole testimony of how we wound up here. But then kind of back it up. So I first became a jailer in Shawnee, Oklahoma. And because that was my dream job. I thought, man, I want to work for Shawnee, Oklahoma. And if you don't know, it's like it's the biggest town in the area where I'm from. And so I worked there for a little bit, and I thought, this is cool. I'm around law enforcement. But, you know, I'd listen to the radio. I'd be in the jail all night. And if you've ever known anybody that's worked in corrections or a jail, it's almost like being in jail yourself, because you're in there. You don't have any light. You're just sitting there. And so it's kind of rough, but I'd hear these officers get into all of this, you know, pursuit, a foot chase, and then they would come, and this guy that's all, you know, fired up and mad at law enforcement, they go, here you go, handle him. And so I decided, I was like, man, I really do want to be an officer. So once I became 21, I applied, and I got hired as an absentee Shawnee Tribal Police Department. And I love that job. It was, you know, I was making minimum wage, but it showed me that I love law enforcement. And I had little to no training, because the way that, like, even applying here, I applied, actually my first job, it took about 6 months through the whole hiring process. When I applied for the tribal police, I applied on a Monday, I interviewed on a Tuesday, I started on a Wednesday. And so, small police department, and I learned a lot there, because we were only about a 10-man department. But our chief of police, he ran it like a big professional department. And so that's one thing I really learned about being professional, treating people professional, and even in our reports. But so my first night, I'm riding with the sergeant, and they kind of laid out this training plan for me, and they tell me I'm going to ride, much like we do here, it's called the field training. I'm going to ride with, you know, a different officer each month and kind of learn how to do the job. And up to this point, I hadn't even shot a handgun before. So, because in the interview, they asked me if I was familiar with handguns, and I go, yeah. I mean, I thought I was, and I mean, they didn't ask you. So, if you hire people, ask the right questions. Have you ever shot a handgun would have been the better question. And so, my first night I'm riding with this sergeant, and we go on a domestic call. And as we get there, we're about to get there, he tells me, hey, and he called me Pup. Hey, Pup, you just set the car, and I'm going to show you how it's done. And he said, I was like, okay. And so he goes into this domestic call between two brothers, and he comes running out of the door, and has the two brothers on his back fighting. And so I run, and all I had to training at this time, I wrestled in high school, and I played football, so it was kind of a mix of some WWF and some football. And so I went and I tackled him and took him to the ground, and he's screaming for help. And so we had some county officers come and help us, and they got there. We get him in custody, and so they're like, and he gets up, he goes, man, Pup, that was amazing. He said, you're good to go. So after that night, I rode by myself. And so it was, you know, there's so many things I did that I probably should have been killed, because I would go on burglaries by myself, and because I just didn't know any better. But also, it, like I said, it made me really love the job. It really made me love to help people. And also working with Native Americans, I really enjoyed that, because you know, at times people would go, oh, you're a sellout, you're one of us, but you're arresting us. And so it was kind of an interesting dynamic to kind of sit and deal with that. But I was there for about 6 months, and then I got hired by Edmond, Oklahoma, which is, if you know, it's just north side of Oklahoma City. It's got about 100,000 people. When I first started there were probably maybe 60-something thousand people. And it's about 100 square miles. And so it's a pretty good sized town. And so while I was there, I was able to do quite a bit of everything. I was a patrolman on all the shifts. I was a field training officer. I was a canine officer, and then I was a detective. And when I was a detective, I only worked narcotics mainly. And how that all worked out is we had a career enhancement where you could go and laterally go to this position and work. And so I knew nothing about narcotics, but I was just going around to everybody at the police department going, hey, do you know anybody dealing drugs? And so this one guy said, you know what's funny? He said, my parents said that the neighbors across the street are always in and out all hours of the night and everything, and they think they're dealing drugs. And so I go, all right, I'll get on. And so while I was out there for this month on career enhancement, we did this technique called the trash pool, where the people are throwing away trash and there's a bunch of drugs in there. So we got a warrant, and when we go in to serve the warrant, there's a bunch of college kids. And so they, when you work in narcotics, you're always trying to get to their sources, their dealers. And so they made a purchase, and the guy came and delivered drugs in front of us and sold to us. We arrested him. And the guy, he pulled up in a brand new Corvette. It was like the, I think, 50th anniversary edition. And so in Oklahoma, you can, he used it to transport the drugs, and it's paid off, so we seized it. So that happened, and then years later, when I promoted to detective, they're like, man, you know a lot about narcotics, which I didn't. They go, do you want to go to the Drug Enforcement Administration as, a task force officer? And I was like, yeah, sure. So that little brief deal let me get to this point with the DEA. And that was, I spent 4 years there, and it was amazing. We worked cases, that dealt with the cartel and big cases. And, we would travel all across the country. There'd be times when they always told me, like, always keep a bag packed in the car, because you never know where you're going to wind up the next day. And I was like, yeah, sure. I was used to, in town working narcotics, and there'd be days where Oklahoma City, we would start following a suspect. Okay, we're driving, all right, we're in Texas now, we're staying in Texas for them, and we're watching them, and you're like, man, I should have packed a bag, And so you kind of learned that kind of fast, but that was, and I've met some amazing people. And two, I met a supervisor there in that position who openly talked about God. And because prior to that, in law enforcement, I don't know if it's the ego or what it is, you don't have a lot of people that openly talk about God. And so this supervisor did. And so that really helped me start to talk more about my faith. And so that was a super experience. And then from that, I got promoted, and I was a sergeant. And I was a sergeant for about 6 years. And I was, so I got on our SWAT team back in 2001. And so I was there for a while. Actually, I was on it, and then I was over the commander over it up until the time I got hired here. And so I was a sergeant, and then I was a lieutenant, and then I was a captain, and then I was a major. And as a major, I was over our internal affairs, and I was over our criminal investigations, and also our patrol division prior to coming here. And to back up too, I've got 6 kids. And a lot of people, they go, oh, you're Catholic. People, they always assume that. And I'm like, no, I'm not. My wife is, So, and a true story. So, my wife, she was born and raised Catholic, and I wasn't. I was born and raised Baptist. And when we met, I was going to a non-denominational church, and so we discussed it, and I'd go to church with her, and she goes, I can tell you don't get as much out of my church as, So she would, whenever we were in Oklahoma, she would get her boys up, and at 7:30 in the morning, go 7:30 mass, come get me, and then we'd go to what we call our home church. Well, then I feel like if I brought her all the way here, I've got to, she's wanting to do the same thing. So we go to Catholic church. So if you see us out and about, the Wise family is going to church twice because we're that bad. So, but I've always jokingly told people if I make it to heaven, it's because I know Jesus and my wife, because she is just a saint. And I have 2 older daughters, and they're full grown. They have kids of their own, and I'm just that weird, unorthodox family. And then and I'm remarried. So with my wife, we've got 4 boys. We've got a 9, 7, 5, and a 2-year-old. And so the 2-year-old was that amazing blessing that God gave us that we didn't know we needed. And it was a shock. It was one of those days where my wife, because we thought we were done after. If you ever had our 3rd kid, you'd go, yeah, you should have stopped. So he has a handful. And so we had decided, no, we're good, we're done. And then this one day, my wife called me. She goes, "I've had a weird feeling, like I did, when I was pregnant." I was like, "Whatever." And then, lo and behold, and so this, we wouldn't trade it for the world. But man, and so people go, "Oh man, they keep you young." I said, "They keep me working for sure." And so And so, actually when I interviewed here, I told them, I said, if I get this job, I'm going to increase your population by 6, And so, and so far we have really enjoyed it. Because I know people are always like, well, it's a smaller town. Yeah. Than what you're used to. But growing up where I grew up, and I like the home feel to it, the town, and I like the interaction like this. I think more people know I'm a cop here than ever did where I was from. Even the neighbors. My wife has made friends with our neighbors and stuff, and some of that's on us too, where we didn't reach out to our neighbors, but around our neighbors now, who are, a lot more people, it just seem friendlier. And so we really appreciate that. My kids are enjoying school. And so fast forward, I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but fast forward, so as I never intended to be a chief until, poor leadership in the wrong positions. It can only take 1 or 2 people to really run an organization. Where I come from, I had 4 chiefs, and 2 good ones and 2 not really good ones. And that it was really during the leadership of 2020 that really started maybe giving me a passion to be to lead an organization. One of the things in 2019, which was a great experience for me, was so I went to the FBI National Academy. It's a 10-week-long school, and you stay there. You go to Quantico, Virginia. It's almost like cop college. You enroll in police classes. You take classes. You even have gym and all that kind of stuff, and you get to go see all the sites. And so they say you get a roommate. And so it's like, if you ever know, so you've got 2 to a room, you have a shared bathroom with 2 more people on the other side. And so the first day of this, you have to check in by 5 o'clock on a Sunday. So I'm there, nobody, and they said, if you don't have a roommate, you got lucky. And so I didn't want a roommate. I was like, 10 weeks, I want to have my own room. So 7 o'clock rolls on, 8 o'clock, I had no roommate. So I start putting my stuff on his side of the room. I called my wife, this is going to be amazing, and this is all. So midnight, I get a knock. And so it's one of the counselors, and they come in and they're like, hey, your roommate just got here and he's from Afghanistan. And I'm like, what? And so I call my wife the next morning and I go, God, not only did I get a roommate, but he's from Afghanistan. What are we going to have in common? I didn't want a roommate from Arkansas, much less Afghanistan. And so, seriously, And so I was like, well, there's no commonality with us. And so the next night they had if you had an international roommate, you got to have it was like a dinner. They had all the high-ups of the FBI there, and you'd go and sit with you. And this guy's 6'5", and I mean, he comes in. I almost didn't even go to that because I was like, I don't even know this guy, and I'm going to go eat dinner with him. So I went, and all the international students, they went around the room talking about, tell us something about your country. And everybody was like very lame stuff, like, I'm from Belgium, we have the best beer. I'm from Germany, we have the best beer. And the guy's getting old. Well, my roommate, his name's Colin, he gets up and he tells kind of a little off-color, dirty joke. And you're like, it is real subtle. But everybody, like all the officers were dying laughing. All the high-ups of the FBI were kind of like, oh my gosh. And I was like, man, this guy's all right, And so the next night, I'd driven a car out there. And so I go, hey, I'm going into town to Walmart. You want to go? And so he goes, yeah, sure. And so as we're going, I told him, I said, man, I don't know anything about you. And I said, I've got a lot of assumptions, and it's my ignorance. I go, I assume you probably don't like me because I'm American. We've been in your country a long time. And you're probably Muslim and I'm Christian. And he's a translator for the military. And so he's like, I had grown to like and appreciate the Western culture. And he goes, we had no infrastructure until y'all came into our country. So I fully appreciate where you're from. And then he goes, and then the religion part, he goes, we believe a lot of the same stuff. And he kind of goes, it's not that big a deal. And I was like, it probably is, but whatever, And so, but we became best friends. And even to the point where he rode back with me home, and he came and stayed a week with me and my family. And so when Afghanistan fell, he barely got out because he was high up. So he was like their version of the CIA. He was like high up in they made it out. They first made it and they got put in Fort Worth, Texas. We went to visit him. So now he's in Nebraska. And so that my kids call him Uncle Khaled. He comes to see us. He's actually came by and visited me here, and I was like, "Hey, you want a job?" And he's like, "No." He's like, it's totally." He goes, "Your laws are a lot different than what I was used to." And so, but that was one of the biggest things that I didn't realize at the time. I mean, I made a great friend out of it, but that showed me that we are all way more alike than we are different. And so that helped me leading into 2020. So when 2020 happened, you know, for a brief second, it felt like society turned their back on law enforcement. You know, it did. And I kind of let myself kind of go into that mode where I felt that too. But then I'm like, you know what? We've got to do a better job as law enforcement. And I mean everywhere. And because, you know, we've always been, some of it's our training. We're kind of standoffish, kind of, no comment type stuff, and almost probably robotic when we come. And so I was like, we need to be more of engaging our community, let them see who we are, be more transparent. And so that really started to kind of plant a seed in myself. And then so as 2020 started going on, it wasn't my job because I was over our patrol division and we had people that did community outreach. But I felt the need to do more of that. And I found other people like-minded because not all officers are built that way. You know, there's different officers that, you know, like I always give the analogy of, we've got officers that are very tactically sound. If someone's breaking into your house, you want this officer to come to your house because they will get there safely, they will protect you, but they're usually not the ones necessarily that is going to read a book to a second grader because they're just not that personality. You know, we're all made different. But I felt a real need to make some real relationships with the community because I've worked for agency where sometimes it's just a dog and pony show, and that's one of the things that people can see when it's real, when it's not, when it's fake. And so that was one of the things I was like, we got to do a better job. And so that kind of started maybe I could do a better job as far as if I had the chance to, you know, because when you're not at the top, your ideas only go so far. And so that's where I kind of started talking to my wife. And one of the things she told me was, she goes, I'll move with you wherever, but do it while the kids are young. Don't wait until, you know, they're in high school. She goes, that would be way harder. And so I was like, okay. And then so, like I said, as I kind of started last year opening up jobs, and there's jobs everywhere for chiefs of police, you know. And in Oklahoma, there's not any, because where I wanted a PD, so anything 50 officers or more to like 499 is considered a mid-sized department. And that's about the size department I wanted. And so I saw Salina, and it first stuck out because I've been here once before. And like I said, I felt like I knew the place, and in all reality, I didn't. And so, but it kept leading. And you know, in the meantime, there's another place in Oklahoma I'd applied, and that place actually would have been closer to my mom, who we're still very close to, but it just didn't feel right. There was something about Salina that felt right, you know. When I even on Facebook looking at different, you know, because for a long time I was just stalking the PD going, okay, does this look like a good fit for me? And you know, just like anything, and then so fast forward, I get hired. And so there's issues, you know, with retention and stuff. But a lot of it, in my experience of law enforcement, it's, you got to treat people right. You know, you got to treat internally right. I can't expect officers to come out and treat citizens right if I'm not treating them right. And so that's one of the biggest things. And I had a mentor a long time ago who told me, you know, as you learn and grow, you know, pay attention to the good stuff you see, but just important, don't become the bad stuff you see. And so that really stuck with me because there's a lot of stuff, and I work hard not to forget where I came from, you know, as far as working those midnight shifts and being fair, you know. And so that's one of the things that as I became chief, I wanted to make it clear that's what, you know, we're going to treat people right internally because we want you to treat people right externally. You know, we want to be professional in what we do, you know, nothing less than first class, and we're going to make mistakes. You know, we're all a bunch of humans. You know, I make mistakes every day, and so, but I think too, I want to be open to opinions and ideas because our officers and our supervisors, they're our subject matter experts, you know. They have answered more Salina calls than I ever will. And so I would be stupid not to listen to them, you know. And so, you know, and also like I said, there was a passion with a lot of our officers to do the community engagements, because when we have things come up, people jump on it and want to do it. And so that's what makes me excited for where we're going in the future. And we got a bunch of promotions that I just opened up. We're about to, like, our whole command staff is changing. And so for me, that's exciting because we're able to get, new leaders in and stuff and get going in the right direction. And sometimes things, I wish it would do a 180 like that, but I feel like we're going in the right direction for sure. Let me open up for any questions.
Sure. Question?
Could you tell me what your definition of a good chief is? You said you had 2 good chiefs and 2 bad.
So the bad ones is because one of the biggest killers of any police organization, and probably any deal, is ego and jealousy, is where I've seen that. And so there's days when I hear people, hey chief, it still sounds odd to me, because at times you're like, and I do, people ask me, hey, what should I call you? I go, call me CJ, and so I go, because that title means nothing outside of our 4 walls over there. And so I think too, trying to be humble is very important. And I think that if you can be humble, you're going to realize that you're not threatened by when people go, hey, because I told people, don't let me run off a cliff. Tell me the truth. I don't want people blowing smoke. And so I think that's one of the biggest things in that servant leadership. One of the first supervisor schools I ever went to, they said early on, they're like, your days of glory are over. You're getting titles, plaques are over. And so that's really stuck with me to where, all the glory goes to the officers and everything. So I think that's one of the biggest things is being humble, but more than anything is treat people right,
I do some work with juvenile offenders, and we had one victim of a property crime telling me that the crime rate in Salina is worse in the state and worse than New York City and worse than Phoenix, Arizona. And I didn't have anything to say to that. Do you have any idea about crime statistics in Salina?
I don't have any right off the top. There are, and I think that's it's perspective, because I know we're not worse than New York City. And I think we're actually, and I'm just saying this anecdotally, it feels like it's dropped some, I would think, just because and I think nationally the trend, even where I came from, was a traditionally low crime rate area. But over the years, because when I was a brand new officer, any shootings or anything, they were so few and far between. But then, like, as I was leaving, that was kind of a common thing. Like, you have a shooting, a robbery, where used to, when I was brand new, you might have one every, maybe once a year, but it's more common. But I don't have any like numbers just right offhand to give you.
I hope I get this straight. What kind of response are you getting from the officers that you are in charge of in terms of if there's a need to shift their attitudes, shift their interaction style with people they have to go and deal with?
I'll try to repeat the question if you can.
So you're asking what, or like the shift the attitudes, are they kind of shifting to kind of go along with what I'm trying to?
Yeah, what's been their response to your perhaps your different way of teaching and approaching?
I think on the most part, very positive. On the most part, a lot of people, I think, were eager for the change and to see something different. And, just like in any organization, there's probably some people that go, I like the old way, But, I think, I never expected 100%, but I think over time, you go, well, everybody else is going this way, so we're all going this way. But even the supervisors, they are picking up on what I'm wanting and what, like, my goal and vision. And so as they instruct officers and what they're doing, I can hear it, they'll almost, recite it back to me going, hey, I know this is what you're wanting, and so this is what we're trying to get officers to do. But on the most part, I think people were ready for some type of change.
The police review board is fairly new, and had you ever worked with one, and what's your perception of how they're doing?
Yeah, I had never. Yeah. So you're asking how the police review board is and like my interaction, and I had never worked with one before, Because, you know, and that's one of the things that also really caught my eye about Salina, to have that, because that, I'm sure, came about in 2020, which a lot of different towns that got proposed or whatever, and I saw a lot of police departments fight that tooth and nail, because, and it goes back to the, oh, I don't want you looking into what I've got going, and I'll tell you what you need to know type stuff. And so I think, though, I like it, because I think if you do stuff right, you don't have to worry about it, you know, and so you don't mind going, hey, this is what we had, here you go. And so I like that transparency, and so I think they're doing a good job, you know, because so, like last year, we had 3 cases, so they review use of force complaints or bias-based policing. We had 3, and so they took a look at those. You know, we do our internal investigation, and then they go and present it to them, and they vote if they see it the same way as we do. And so I think it's very beneficial, and I think too, it opens up some of that trust with the public. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay, the fire department downtown office just completely went by and you barely glanced at it. Does it bother you a little bit that you'd like to know what's going on?
You know, a little bit, but you know, it's funny. I think when I was a brand new officer, I would have been on my phone, hey, what's going on? And the longer I get to, I trust our people, and I know they're gonna handle it. And so the only time that there's midnight calls every now and then I get a call, and so I get prepared. I'm like, oh, here's the big one. What hit it? And usually it's just, hey, we had this, everybody's fine. I'm like, okay, that's so. I think too, a little bit of maturity. I've gotten to where I don't get all excited about that stuff. Where I just know it's going to be handled, and if they need me, they'll call me.
That's what we were waiting for too.
Yeah.
To see if you were gonna hit it.
Yeah, that's how I know it's right now is not that big a thing. My phone isn't vibrated or nothing.
I've lived in Salina about 20 years now, and so I'm still something of a stranger. And I think that's true in many communities. But as I walk through different parts of Salina, and I'm, of course, finding myself where I live primarily. But as I go to different areas of Salina, it strikes me that there are different communities almost visible besides just the housing itself. Do you have any observations about different communities in Salina, interaction with them, observations about them as a police officer?
You know, so he's asking me about different interactions with the different communities in Salina. And one of the things too is, for us as law enforcement, we want to get into all the communities, but we have to have like somebody to kind of bridge for us. Because if I come in and just like, hey, we just want to come and do this thing, people are like, whoa, we're here. And so one of the great things, and if you know Cash Hollister, and so me and him sat down, and this was actually the first time I came here, is we met here for coffee. And he doesn't drink coffee though, at least at the time he didn't. And so, so I still like him though. But and so we were talking, and you know, we were just talking about, because I was interested in his music, his faith, and we got to talk about policing and kind of my philosophy and stuff. And he asked me, he goes, what have y'all ever done for the Black community? And I said, nothing that I know of. I was like, do you have a way in? And so, you know, over the 4th of July weekend, he had, it was a North End block party. He invited us to, we went, and it was very successful. And we plan on we're going to be there again next year. Well, then just 2 weeks ago, we had an open forum for the Hispanic community. And that went very well. And I mean, because, you know, especially the Hispanic community, there's the aspects of, you know, your immigration status that they're scared of us. And that's one of the things we reassured them that, you know, I care more about your safety than about your immigration status. And because we're not INS, you know, and so we had a good interaction, but those are the things we're wanting to do more and more of. But please, if you have connections to any of these communities, reach out to us, and we are more than willing to come and be a part of that. But we do have to have some kind of, because, you know, we just can't bully our way into anything like that.
If a police officer picked up someone, and that person felt that they were being mistreated, or the officer wasn't very nice or whatever, and made a complaint to you, how would you handle that in terms of trying to resolve whatever?
basically you're asking like someone's making a complaint on an interaction with an officer. It depends on the different levels. You know, if someone calls in and says, had a traffic stop, an officer was rude, a lot of times that officer's supervisor will take a look at that, and they will use, you know, it's kind of a smaller, but if it's a more serious, like, oh, they use force on me when they shouldn't or something like that, we have an internal affairs investigator that looks into that and runs that investigation. But every complaint we get, because sometimes I just had one today where someone goes, I'm not wanting to make a complaint, but I just want to let you know, I thought your officer was rude. And so gave that to the supervisor, we went ahead and looked into it like we would anything else, reviewed the video, saw some things that we were right on, some things that we needed to correct. And so we addressed it that way. But everything gets looked into.
This is my turn again. You just mentioned videos. Do the officers run their personal videos all the time here in our community or not?
As far as to say all the time, no. I mean, they're responsible for, like if an officer right now is driving around the car, it's not running. But if they get out on a call, they're supposed to switch it on. And so very few times, and it may happen every now and then, but because usually there's more than one officer going to the call. So we're catching video of all these, you know, there's something going on. But it's up to the officer to turn on the camera.
SDI, or the downtown district has like 34, 36 cameras that are apparently running all the time. And they're only reviewed if there's some incident research. Does the police department work directly with that, or?
Yeah, we have to request to get the access, and you're right, like if we have an incident go on, we'll go, hey, can we get, you know, September 10th, this day, can we come look at that? And they'll allow us to do that. But yeah, so we're aware of the cameras and stuff, and we use them for anything that happens in those areas.
I have a recollection that I believe the police department was trying to recruit a social worker to work on de-escalating things. And I know that's a real tough hiring environment. I just wanted to know where the department was at on that project.
Yeah, so we had, you know, they were working with the county. We got 2 co-responders, is what we call it. We have one right now, and she's, you know, just kind of in the initial stages of getting that going and everything. And they're still working to try to find us the second one. And I think it's for them, hiring is just like anybody else. And two, that's enough of it. It's a brand new position. I think some of them, this is what we've been told, are kind of holding back to see how this first position goes and let the guinea pig go, and then they go, okay, yeah, I might be interested. So yeah, it's, you know, it's a great tool for us to have, and you know, because the whole mental health aspect, law enforcement never wanted into that, you know, and I think people kind of mistakenly go, because I've had people tell me that, going, man, you know, y'all being involved in this mental health game is not, this isn't a good fit. Like, we never wanted it, you know, but it got dumped on law enforcement, you know, and so we're trying to do the best we can, you know, but at the end of the day, we're not mental health people. You know, we're working on getting a lot more of our officers, you know, CIT trained, which to deal with, you know, people going through a mental health crisis, but still, there's better avenues, you know, and we're there more for the safety aspect, but hopefully, you know, as this keeps growing, and we're having a lot of positives of interaction with having our co-responder, and she's able to help us out a lot. Because there's a lot of stuff that just because, you know, and some people mistakenly, just because you have a mental health crisis or, you know, that doesn't mean it's not against the law, you know. And so a lot of people forget that. And so that's where that co-responder, that's her alley, that's her wheelhouse. And like I said, we really have nothing. Then too, we can escalate stuff just because from me showing up. So it's a lot better to have someone in plain clothes there that can do all the talking, and they're trained for that too. So yeah, it's coming along, but hopefully by this time next year we'll have them both up and running.
Where does that individual get trained at?
So she, you know, we had this level. She's the licensed mental health, and so she had that prior to even coming to us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Central Kansas Mental Health. That's what they're trying to get them trained before they actually come to us. And we kind of talked about, do we, you know, get like the social work aspect of it? Do we, because it was a grant, and make sure we're meeting that wording. because it could possibly open up a pool of applicants. So we're trying to tweak that to get the right fit.
In addition to the mental health issues, what about the drugs and alcohol issues?
Right.
Addiction issues?
Yeah,
That
and,
being
you know.
a disease process, how?
And CKF, you know, they work pretty closely together, and that's kind of one of the things, that's an avenue that we try to take people down that road to get them involved in that, you know. And I know they're working on getting a mental health court, you know, which I think that would be really great. Where I came from in Oklahoma, they had that. So there'd be times where we may have someone going through a mental health episode and they committed a crime. Well, rather than to send them to the normal charging, you could send them to the mental health court aspect where, you know, their treatment and everything is kind of tied to what their sentence is, so to speak. And I saw more positives, way more positives come out that way than this other way. So we're definitely looking forward to that.
I haven't kept up with this, but how's the diversity hiring going? Last time I knew anything about the police in Salina, that was an issue as far as.
Well, hiring, period, is an issue. You know, and I didn't realize it's the location is where, so, you know, you go too far east, you know, you got the agencies, you know, Lawrence, all them, you got people down there, south, Wichita, and so there's kind of, you know, we can get to the north and the west, so that's kind of a tricky thing. You know, we're setting at about what I'm very proud of, and this is something that the PD had in place before I got here, but we got about 19% female, which that's pretty good. I mean, yeah, our goal is, because we joined a 30 for 30 initiative a couple of years ago, and the goal of it is to get 30% female by the year 2030. And so that's one goal. And we've got, I think we're setting at, demographic wise, where there's representation that equals about, but we can always do better. And so, you know, some of the things we've tried is, because we're trying to think outside the box, you know. You know, we usually have luck at Kansas Wesleyan, we have luck at Fort Riley and stuff, but we're trying to reach out to different places to, you know, broaden that. You know, we went to Haskell, Indian University last year, and we're going back to, and we're in the initial stages of building, that kind of the same thing about building a community, you know. We went to their graduation, and we didn't set up this big recruiting thing, because the first time we're there, I wanted to, hey, let's start working, so we're working with their recruiters and they're inviting us back and stuff like that. So we're trying what we can, you know, as far as to think outside the box and to hopefully get, and you know, that's the thing, we're just looking for the best qualified. And so but I think that's one of the things. And so so we have 6 Spanish speakers, and so that impressed me. And because where I came from, we had 1, and we had 126 officers. And so, you know, here we're allotted 84 officers, and we're sitting about 68 right now, 67, 68. And so percentage-wise, that's pretty good.
6 officers?
Pardon?
6 officers,
Yes.
Spanish speakers?
Yes. So.
Not just translators?
Oh, no, they're Spanish speakers. They're more the, you know, because where I came from, the one Spanish speaker we had was like a textbook Spanish speaker, where like, yeah, it was very choppy and very brutal to listen to. And so, you know, when we had this outreach, I was listening to some of our officers communicate. I was like, wow, that's impressive, you know. I mean, I didn't know what they were saying, but it sounded really good.
They got you fooled.
They did.
So, what's your department's role in working with the community to work on the homelessness issue?
You know, so that's another thing where I think a lot of people can get misled and they think it's a police issue, you know. And so, and there's aspects like if you break the law, we're going to go and enforce it. But also there's a much bigger aspect, because usually the homeless, in the way any that I've interacted with, there's always maybe an addiction going on, or mental health. And so you can't arrest your way out of that, you know. And so I think some people think, you know, like our norms were, if I get arrested, oh, I'm gonna lose my job, oh, the embarrassment. Well, it doesn't necessarily apply when you're struggling with all these other issues. And so we are a part of it, and we are over meeting regularly with the community, but it's a bigger issue and it's something that we need to talk through and stuff. And it's one of those deals where I think the models that are kind of working, if you look at all other places, is helping them get some type of housing, and that's what works. Us arresting them, and that's what I tell people, even if we wouldn't arrested them every day, they're gonna be right back out. So it's just that's a Band-Aid, And so, like I said, we will address those issues where the law is being broken, but the homelessness issue is really not a police issue.
And I'm glad you raised it as a homelessness issue rather than homeless people.
Right.
Because that was just brought up yesterday in a group I was in, and I thought that was a good distinction. The meeting that the city had in January, I don't know if you were here yet or not.
I wasn't.
It was pretty much, okay, we're going to talk about all the problems that the homeless people have without looking at the systemic issues that cause homelessness. And so it's not my brainchild, but I think that's a good way to look at it, is distinguishing those two things.
Right, and it's such a big issue, but it's an issue that us as a community, we gotta sit down and talk about. And like I said, we've got a part in it, but it's a way smaller part than people think. I mean, because people think, oh, we can stack charges and lock them away forever, and I was like, man, some of the major drug dealers aren't getting locked away forever. And two, the way we enforce stuff, we can't go after people because of their living status, and I told people we can violate their rights, it's just like I could your rights, and so we have to make sure we're doing everything above board, but that, you're right, that's where the fix is, and I don't know if we'll get to it in my lifetime, but it's worth talking about, and it's worth us really getting beyond talking about, but let's do something about it. And you may strike out a few times with some people because of that mental health aspect. As I was an officer coming up, we had different people that were passionate about working with mental health. I wasn't, and it was only because, man, it was like building a house of cards. I'd see these officers work, they'd get people, housing, get them a job, and then something sets them off, where they get off their medications and they go back to ground zero. And I was like, God, that would just be deflating. And so I think going into it, as we develop whatever we get, we got to know there's going to be some times we're going to fail, but there's going to be some people we're going to help, and so it's just worth it but like I said, I think that, and I appreciate you bringing that up because it is a bigger topic than just us. I think a lot of people, though, think it's just a police issue, and it's not.
Good to see you, Chief.
Good to see you.
I really appreciate that you bring empathy and compassion to this job.
Yeah, thank you.
Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you in that one, I want to ask you this question as it relates to that. We see that the county has opened up a new jail and they're having a night in the slammer, which I think is meant to be kind of lighthearted, but in a lot of our opinions, there's nothing lighthearted about going to jail.
Right.
And losing your liberty. So my question for you is that, what would maybe be some non-negotiables for you as far as use of force and how you train the officers that this is where the line is? And so what are maybe an example of your experience that you
Could you repeat the question again?
I'll try. So basically, he was asking the non-negotiables for me, like the use of force and stuff like that. There's a willful, and then there's like, okay, if I use force, because, an excessive use of force is anything, once someone's in custody, and this is just boiling it down to simple, and then you keep applying force, whatever it may be. And it could be anything from, okay, I got the guy, and just because you're in handcuffs doesn't mean you're technically under control. But say I've got someone under control and I shove them. To me, that's excessive use of force. And it's on the scale of it, it's a little down here, but we're going to address it. There's no, oh yeah, hey man, don't do it. No, that's serious. Anytime you do that is serious. To like, especially when you start striking somebody and it's not needed, that, depending, it's hard. facts and the details that go into a lot into the story. But, you know, if you're striking somebody and they're, you know, they are in custody, that's a non-negotiable. You know, if it's like I'm punching somebody or something like that. Somebody that, you know, kind of not exactly on this, but that lies about it. You know, where I came from, I've seen this where, you know, someone's taken in custody. He was fighting. I hit him once. You watch body camera. You hit him 4 times. To me, that's non-negotiable. You know, and there's no wiggle room. You know, I mean, you hurted yourself, but also you probably did it to cover up these extra use of the forces, which were excessive. Does that kind of answer?
Oh, absolutely, perfect, thank you.
What kind of consequences, short of being fired, would officers or do officers have when they do things like that?
So depending on the severity of it, you know, you've got our discipline scales, anything from counseling to like a reprimand to up to days off. Like me, as a department head, I can give a week off without pay. Anything more than that, I can send it to the city manager and ask for, hey, I'd like 20 days for this officer without pay. And so, but he has to approve anything more than a week's worth, more than 40 hours. So it ranges anywhere from, depending on what happens, from something minor to something, you know, short of, you know, losing your job to several days off without pay.
I am not really up to date on this issue, but I'm thinking about juveniles and how when our juveniles are detained, they are sent out of town, which really takes them away from their family support. I understand that the juvenile facility we had was just not it.
Right.
I came from a community that had a much better facility than that. But, and I think our diversion programs have helped us in that realm. We probably try not to put children in detention. But do you have any fresh ideas about that situation?
Yeah, I think, you know, what I really like about here too is the community corrections, is because I'm not used to that where I come from. It's usually the only time you get on any type of, what I would say probation is once you get ran through the system. So community, I like that aspect, and I think if we could do that more for like juveniles, like before you get in the system, let's try everything we can, because you're right. I think you can look at any statistic, and once you put a juvenile in the system, their odds go way up for being there later on. And I think that's the time we need to definitely try to do some type of diversion. And that's another one of those things where it's even incarceration in general. Big topic, but we need to start talking about that kind of stuff too, because what we're doing is probably not the best.
I guess I'll say 2 things. First of all, I want to speak up for the Salina Initiative for Restorative Justice, which does just that, gets the cases from community corrections for juvenile offenders and makes them sit across from their victims and work out something to make things right. But I also want to ask you about, you have like 2 degrees in organizational management. Did you start thinking about being a chief and then go out to learn that, or how did you end up in those fields?
It just, you know, my first degree, because I'd always used to hear is like, don't get in criminal justice, because it'll be worthless if you get out of law enforcement. But I did that, and it's funny, whenever I took the management side for criminal justice for my master's, the books were almost identical. It's all talking about leadership, management, and stuff. But, you know, kind of going back to treating your people right, you know, one of the things, though, is they used to talk about the dictator leadership. And, you know, they don't talk about that in books anymore because that doesn't work, you know. But unfortunately, a lot of law enforcement is still stuck in that, you know. And so, no, I never had intentions like that. Yeah, I think it's probably, I have seen people early in their career go, I'm going to be chief of police. And sometimes I think if you do that, you're skipping rungs on the ladder. You need to spend time at each rung, and I've worked with people that skipped too many rungs, and they really didn't know how to do the job down here. And so I'd never wanted to be that person, so I guess I never really thought about it until it kind of hit me, and I was like, I've got the qualifications, I can go and do it. So once again, it's a God thing. It just worked out, you know, where I look back at my life, even meeting my roommate from Afghanistan, that was a big point of change for me. And so, like I said, every little piece has been a cog that put me here. Yeah.
I was wondering about reviews and histories of officers that come into the police department. You know, we've heard stories of people that have been shifted from one department to another, and they got horrible records in another department. How do they end up being rehired?
Right.
How do you handle that?
You know, we through our background check, because we've had people that just since I've been here, you know, looks great, but then when they you start looking into their background, they're running from something or something's going on. And so our background investigators really done a good job of weeding those people out. And so, yeah, and two, they sit through a panel interview, and so they got to answer questions about, hey, why are you coming from here? Why, and then of course it's easy to, especially around here, everybody knows somebody. Because a lot of times, and so somebody go, oh, that's easy. I know somebody down there in Hutchinson. I'll call them, and so it works out. And so, like I said, because of that, we've weeded out people that they applied and they look good up until that point. And I think sometimes, and that's one thing we have talked about is we're not going to lower our standards, even though our numbers aren't where we want them to be, because it'll cost you way more, getting that bad hire than. So we're really trying to keep our standards of where we want them as an organization.
You've been here 9 months, or 8 months anyway. Has there been any mention of the unsolved murders? There are 3 or 4 counties, one that's in the county in this area, just a few miles away. And is there how do you address, or do you address follow up on those cold cases? I mean, I drive by Connecticut and Iron 12 times a day, and a lady was killed there 20-some years ago with nothing ever happened.
Right, so they caught me up to speed on something. I had one of our captains just kind of, hey, we've got this one, and they told me the details of it. And there's some that, and two, sometimes you've got evidence, and sometimes you wait for technology to catch up. And I mean, it's happened a lot. And so we've got some cases where we think we know, and we're like, man, if technology could get a little bit more advanced, we might be there to that case. And there's a couple of them that are like, man, just because of the collection, or even, we went to the lab and, and they use up all the sample to test. There's that where some of them may not get solved, just to be honest, but there's a couple I got briefed on that I think once the technology, because DNA progresses all the time, and so I think we're going to get there at some point in time, because we've got some, but sometimes they want a bigger sample, and so hopefully once that they can start getting more from that smaller sample, I think we're going to have hopefully evidence to go with the person that everything else is pointing to.
So try to make this quick. I know it's a subjective question. I know you don't have control over it. You asked the question about the police review board, and I think you said that it's relatively new to you and your experience. One of the criticisms from some about the creation of the new police review board, which was a change from the one that was there before, and I hope I understand this correctly, I stand to be corrected, that both the police chief and the sheriff are on the board. Do you have any thoughts if you were going to make any changes? Should you make changes? What are the advantages or disadvantages of having the chief and the sheriff on the board itself?
So we're not on the board now.
Oh, so you're not?
No, we have an officer that's assigned to it.
Okay.
And so, or he's assigned, he volunteered, and so he's there to kind of answer, because they'll go into like a closed door because of the details and the people. And so, but yeah, I'm not on. I go to them there to answer any questions, like when they have meetings, but I'm not actually on the board.
But you are there at meetings regularly to be informed by the board, or you call
to answer any questions, or to sometimes if we don't have any cases for them to review, we may go, hey, here's a new initiative we got going, kind of keep them abreast of what's going on in the PD.
I appreciate that. Okay, go educate us.
Yeah.
I have. Are you as excited as I am about Killers of the Flower Moon coming?
I am very excited about
Wait for that
that.
movie to
Yeah.
come out.
No, I'm
Your
very.
FBI.
B-side.
Oh, She asked if I was excited for the Killer of the Flower of the Moon. Yes, the movie. Yes, I'm very excited. You know, it's funny, so in our family, we still have the allotted land that was given to our family, and it's still, we got a family cemetery there, and it's out by Anadarko. That's kind of where our tribe is located at. And so, yeah, it's, we're excited about that. And we've got a lot of friends that are Osage. And so I've heard these stories, you know, for a long time.
And you know what's interesting is that happened at the same time that the Tulsa massacre happened.
Right.
Almost the same year.
Right.
In that same, but anyway, yeah, so.
Yeah, isn't
welcome to Kansas.
Right.
But I can't wait to see that.
Now, you know, and talking about the Tulsa massacre, you know, that's what's weird. My mom told me about it, but you never heard about it in school.
Exactly.
You know? And then now it's coming out. But like I said, my mom told me all the time about it. And then, so even like, as this kind of, what the last, probably from 2020 on, gaining more traction, even my wife, she's like, I never heard about it. I was like, I knew about it just because of my mom. I was like, school never mentioned a word about it. So, yeah, that's a pretty significant piece of history, you know. But
Maybe you can have a discussion, leave a discussion after that movie's in town, after you see
oh, I'd love to.
it.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, no,
So,
yeah.
So I actually have one more Salina policing question, and I know that SPD does not manage the jail, but tell us your thoughts on the burden that is imposed on people when they can't make bail and they just can't get out of jail and they get stuck. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I mean, you know, yeah, that's the thing, is like, you don't ever want to create a debtor's prison, you know, and, you know, yeah, you got money, people can bond out, and then, but so, yeah, there's something that needs to be adjusted and fixed, because, you know, just because of your financial status, that you may sit in jail up until the point, you know. And so, yeah, that's something, like I said, there's so much about the criminal justice system that we, as society, lawmakers, we need to sit down and have a good talk about and go, what's the best idea? Because in a lot of times, there's probably someone that works in the, you know, the front line, that they probably have the best ideas, you know, if we just sit and listen to them. So, but I think, yeah, there's something about that we got to get fixed.
In wrapping up, yeah, thank you so much. That was very interesting. I want you to buy treats as you go out the door, so it was worth Tammy's time to keep Ad Astra open. It's normally closed on Mondays, so she did this for us. Tammy has a broken foot, and so yeah, let's clap for Tammy. And for our baristas and our cooks. All right, Tammy has a broken foot, so she had to go home and elevate it. But I want to mention some upcoming events. The second Tuesday of this October and November are Lunch and Learns. October is Banned Books, a program from the library. That's the second Tuesday of October. The second Tuesday of November is an update from Jane Anderson and Friends of the River to give us the latest on the river project. I also want to mention that sometime Sunday night in October, which someone is going to tell me, is the speed dating with the candidates. It's October 15th, Sunday afternoon at Sunrise Presbyterian Church. We're going to have it's a new method that we've learned of from Wichita League of Women Voters, and we have round tables, and there are, I think, 10 candidates, and we're going to have however many candidates there are, that's how many tables we'll have, and everybody sits around one of them, and the candidates will move from table to table. So you'll get 10 minutes with each candidate for the city commission and the school board, which is a little awkward for me to talk about here since we're not promoting any candidates. But anyway, so candidate speed dating Sunday, October 15th, you say? Yes, 15th. Okay, so come out to all these other people. We're so happy all of you came, and thank you to Janet and David for